Perfect. Good evening, everybody. My name is Kia Manama, and I am your host tonight. Please welcome back to the Blacknificent Show as a part of Arise Black Child. Today, my guest is somebody that I respect completely, somebody that I really, really value, and someone whose opinion and insight I feel is probably the greatest gift to us as South Africans, and something we should all be exploring and something we should all partake in. My guest today is none other than Kabelo Mahlobokwane, who is actually an educator, an entrepreneur, and also an activist. So let's introduce and welcome, rather, Kabelo Mahlobokwane. How are you today, my brother?
Good evening and good evening to everyone that's watching. I'm alive, man, and surviving. We're grateful to be breathing even today. I hope you're good.
I'm always good. I'm always good. I'm grateful to be here with you. I am very excited actually about this. I'm sorry we started so late. I seem to be having all sorts of problems with my connections today. But as we've already discussed, or as I've already said, you're an activist, you're an entrepreneur, but beyond that, you're a teacher. And I think that's the first thing. That's your day job. That's your 9 to 5, if I'm not mistaken. But for those who don't know you, who is Kabelo Mahlobokwane?
Kabelo Mahlobokwane is just an ordinary boy who grew up in the rural areas of Tofante, just outside Kwamhlanga and Mpumalanga. And I think that's basically the foundation of all that you've said now, the titles. It's growing up in a family where I was raised by a domestic worker, my mother, and a construction worker, my father. And now having to go to university in 2013 after matriculating in 2012 and being exposed to a different environment of activism. And that's what gives birth to the Kabelo that many people know now. But I'm just an ordinary boy, still the same old guy from Mekas.
I beg to differ. I don't think there's anything ordinary about you. I must disagree. But I wanted to ask, do you identify as a Pan-Africanist or not? And if you don't, then why don't you?
Look, yeah, I'm pro-African and I'm for the African unity, and I think that's what Pan-Africanism is.
Yeah.
A lot of people can define it in many ways, but I'm very passionate about Africa, and I believe so much in her liberation one day. And in a lot of things that I do them because I would like to see an African child one day living under better conditions than what we see right now. So maybe then I would say I identify as a Pan-Africanist. But yeah, that's where my passion lies. That's where everything started. Just trying to see and contribute to the building and the betterment of Africa.
I hear you. I hear you. What subjects do you teach, by the way, Koskolo?
I teach English home language in a primary school. That's my main subject, and then I also do life skills. Yeah, so I moved to grade 5s. Yeah, funny enough, I teach English.
Okay. So you're not into like teaching history, any of that?
I wish, but in primary
I don't know if
school,
you can still hear me.
I think I lost you a bit, but now I can hear you. So you know, yeah. So I found myself teaching this subject, the language, which a lot of people find very challenging. I'm very comfortable there, but I do wish that at some point, maybe before I leave education, I can go and teach history, not in primary school, but in high school, and just get that experience because I do love engaging with young people. And in primary school, it's very difficult to engage with them at that level, even though we do have conversations sometimes. So we speak about our lives and all of that. Yeah. So I do find myself, because English is basically a main subject, you find yourself having to tap into all other subjects. So we do tap into history, we do tap into geography and many other subjects. So luckily I'm able to do that, through the language subject that I'm teaching.
As a teacher now, I think you can obviously see the difference or aspects in our curriculum that's lacking. You said yourself that you're interested in seeing Black people advance or the African child advance, I think you can see areas in the curriculum that are lacking, that aren't benefiting the Black child. Just areas that just are very westernized and aren't, like I said, don't mention history or so forth. What of those aspects, what do you think are holding us back the most?
For me, the South African, I think I'm losing you again, but I'll try to respond because I think I have a question.
The things that you're teaching.
So I think, for me, I have a problem with the South African curriculum as a whole in its entirety, because I'd be lying if I'd say there are things that I find, there are things that are relevant, but they're so minimal that you end up to see the whole system scrapped, because we have a curriculum that, number one, does not speak to the real lives that and experiences that our children face in South Africa every day, the majority of them. And we have a curriculum that has an umbrella approach, which basically all learners in South Africa are guided by the same policy documents. And to be honest, in South Africa, we have a very, very, very deep, vivid society. And it cannot be right that we have a curriculum that still tries to enforce the issue of uniqueness in South Africa, whereas there's nothing like that. But it's very difficult for example, when I used to speak on this topic, I used to give an example of a USP. I once came across a question paper in grade 12 that was asking children or learners, what is a USP? What is a USP? And in that question, it's a very easy question for those that know what a USP is. And I think I faced this when I was doing grade 12. But and according to the standards of such a question paper, this is supposed to be an easy question. But if you go to a rural area in Limpopo, where learners do not even have access to electricity, and you ask them what is a USP, this will not be a comfortable and easy question for them. Whereas if you go to a learner in Sentin, they can just get the mark for free. And that's how our curriculum is designed, especially examinations. They write the same exam across the country, but they are not exposed to the same environments. They're not exposed to the same resources, same teaching methods, and even the content is not the same. We find that in some schools, they're using textbooks that were last updated 20 years ago or 10 years ago. And we know that information changes every day. But over and above that, I think the curriculum of the South African education system is still left behind, in the sense that we're now no longer speaking about employment. We're speaking about trying to trying to develop independent thinkers, education, people that can be able to problem solvers to the solutions that we're facing today. We speak about entrepreneurship, we speak about the empowerment in terms of skills, because that's what the fourth industrial revolution is forcing us to do. But the curriculum that we're using in our schools now has not adapted to that. It's still the same curriculum that was adapted when it's similar to what was adapted when education was being introduced by the missionaries in South Africa. And that's my problem with it. We need to adapt. We're 10 steps behind, whereas we should be 10 steps ahead in South Africa because of the many advancements that we have. That is why our education system, actually last I checked, was ranked second lowest in Africa.
Yeah.
Way below Zimbabwe and many other countries. And yet you think that South Africa, because of the investment that government puts in education, we should be producing and having a lot of quality outputs, but there's nothing like that. So that's my problem. It's the same issue that Albert Einstein spoke about when he said, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, that is stupid, because we are using the same approach of everyone. We are failing to acknowledge the different intelligences that we have in our learners. We're failing to acknowledge the different environment communities that contribute to the information that we have and develop in our own minds. So we're in trouble. We're in trouble in terms of the curriculum, what we're teaching our learners.
Honestly, I completely agree, and I didn't even think of it that way, but that did broaden my understanding of it. But people see it as an approximation, just a general word, just a general understanding, and I'm understanding, what is your definition of decolonizing education? Or rather, what is your definition of decolonization?
I have a problem with that. I don't know, maybe it might sound controversial, but
That's fine.
I do not think that at this stage that we are in today, in the world that we're living in today, we should be focusing a lot on the same approaches that were adopted by those that came before us in the 90s and the 80s. I believe that what we should think about today is, yes, it is decolonizing education in a way. But I believe that the terminology that we should be using and the language that we should be using should be a language that speaks on developing a curriculum that is progressive, a curriculum, but also that recognizes globalization, because we live in a global world now. We no longer live in secular states. And I believe that instead of us focusing and obsessing too much about, we need to decolonize education, but I don't think it should be what our focus point is at this stage, because we get to realize that a lot of people have different definitions that now you just asked. Some of them will call you, will tell us about a black modernization, to say we need to go back and study and find research on what would the South African life, or life of a South African look like today if it wasn't for the disturbance of a modernization. And when we decolonize it, we go back to our roots. But other people would also argue that then if we decolonizing it, where we're going back to, which roots? Because even that has been disturbed. We've lost our culture, a sense of our culture. We've lost a sense of belonging. There's a lot of things that you do, even the attire that we wear. You see on Heritage Day in South Africa, even the attire that we wear is a Western attire. We celebrate it as African. And then what do we mean by saying African, and what do we decolonize it from? From the colonization that happened when? And what do we think is the colonization even today? That is going to be a very long discussion. And in terms of practicality, I think it's going to take much more time than if you focus on looking at what does the world, the industry today, and the world that we live in require in terms of education, and how do we move forward? How do we then make sure that the education benefits and suits the world that we live in today, than obsessing about some things that you know that practically will achieve them, or at least achieve them now. My concern is always, I always say to people, we can go back and speak about a lot of ideologies. I also do love them sometimes, but my activism is directed at saying, I want to see a change in a black child's life today. Actually, a change in the lives of those that are disempowered and marginalized today. I do not want to also speak about a lot of theories that will be taking 10 years and 20 years. I want you to tell me, if we do 1, 2, 3 in the next 5 years, then you will see the socio-economic status of black people and the marginalized South Africa, improving. And I want that. I want you to tell me, if we take these 3 steps, 10 million people in South Africa will be able to afford bread, as opposed to what's happening right now. Or if we do 3 and 4 and 5, then by next year we'll be having a lot of young people having access to higher education, or better education in primary school. I think that's what my interest is in terms of speaking about the education system, and even in general the country and the systems that we live in, and how can we improve them, or as opposed to what do we mean about decolonization. It's a very confused topic, and a lot of people are still having a lot of debates about it. And the debates are usually had by those that can be able to afford bread. If you go to like before I went to university, you're asking about those things, I would never even be able to define them or even understand what you're talking about. But now that I can be able to afford bread, it's when we try to engage in those conversations, because I can be able to afford to buy a book in the bookstore, as opposed to buying bread. It's now that we want to come and act like we're intellectual, whereas we forget that we are doing this at the expense of the poor and the most rejected masses of our people, who do not even understand these conversations that we have, even if we take them to that level. Sure.
True. I understand. You had a few interviews during the Fees Must Fall protest, or the protest rather. Right now we're facing the issues, or rather we had the issues at the beginning of the year, and I'm not sure where it's ended, on financial exclusion and just the financial crisis in the country. Could you please take me through what your perspective was regarding these two? Because I think they're interlinked and they're very similar cases and they're very similar movements or protests. What was your take on it? Because I heard you say a lot on it.
I'm sorry, I think your connection was a bit sketchy there. If you can repeat the question.
Sorry, I was saying that last year, not even last year, but just prior, during the Fees Must Fall movement, you had quite a few things to say and you had quite a few interviews that you did. And you mentioned earlier on right now, Uguti, higher education and what we want education to look like in the future is one of your big focuses. So what is your insights or your perspective regarding just the financial exclusion that's still happening till today in our country?
You know, that's a very emotional topic to speak about for me, because every time I think of Fees Must Fall, then you must think of the struggles that majority Black people, but also majority the poor in South Africa had to face just to access higher education. You go to higher education with people that come from very comfortable backgrounds and schools that have bursaries that they give to them to access higher education. And then you attend the same classes with those people, and then you share even the same lecturers and same study material with those people. But they are already a step ahead, because while they're still trying to register, they've already started with content, academic content, and they're studying. And when the exam day comes, you'll be sitting in the same room for the same examination. You know, the poor students in South Africa even now are still, they have not yet come to the issue of accommodation. They're not yet at the issue of meals on campus. They're not yet at the issue of study resources on campus. We are still speaking about registering now. And that's a very painful thing that we have to experience. But on the other hand, I usually say, you know what, before I depress myself too much, maybe as young people in South Africa, because I believe in young people. The elder people can come and be there to advise, but I do not believe in them, because, you know, one other thing, these old people come to us and they give us policies that are progressive, very wonderful, Agenda 2063. But if you look at the people that were sitting and deciding on those policies, and you look at their age, you realize that they will not be there. Science tells us that they will not survive up until that age of 2063. And we are the ones that are going to be left behind now and trying to figure out what went wrong. Then we set another agenda that's going to go over the limit of the age that we have according to science today. And so I believe in these should be programs that are led by young people. And I do not believe that entirely young people are ready if we speak about free education and all of those things. I do not believe that. That's my concern. I don't believe that we're ready for our own liberation as of yet. Maybe controversial, but it's not because of the color of the ticket that I'm reading. I want to make an example, because I sometimes try to speak truth to truth. That cannot make sense for me for someone to come today, because it's January in higher education, and say to me, I must protest against the government for failing to register me. And then 2 months later, when it's elections, the same person comes and tells me to vote for the same government that we were on the street protesting against. And this same person that come and tell us to vote for these people, they tell us to vote at the time where even the things that we were fighting for on the streets are not yet achieved. And these are young people that are living these things. And we saw earlier this year with reports of Project Academia, where certain students were used to try and kill the momentum of the Fees Must Fall protests in 2015 and 2016. These things, these acts were done by young people that we thought were progressive, the same people that we shared the protest lines with, and the same people that shared our pain, who understood what we had to go through in order for us to be able to get the attention that we got and to get the mobilization that we got. And those are the people whom today got, some of them apparently got rewards of some sort, and they're living the nice life and they've moved on. There's a second generation now of the same people that are going to be used for Project Academia, and we're allowing them to be within our spaces as young people. We're even allowing ourselves to be used in those spaces. And if you think about that, I don't think young people are ready now. Even if we can speak about Fees Must Fall, this year I thought of going all in and supporting Fees Must Fall, but I understood that it was just a momentum thing. I know this is what happens. We've been doing it for a lot of years. And I asked myself, should we still be doing it the very same way that got a lot of our comrades arrested in 2016, got a lot of our comrades suspended and expelled from universities in 2016. And I went to the University of Pretoria and I managed to speak, I think, to some SRC. I said to them, guys, you do this thing, it's important, but please just be careful that you do not become the victims of your own struggle. And these are the same ways that we took from Joseph Matuja when he came to address us in 2016. He said to us, be careful, do not become the victims of your own struggle. And tell you what, he was hated by everyone there. And just 2 months after he spoke this to us, we started being expelled, we started being arrested. And I remember his words. And I will never take his words for granted because that's basically what happens with these protests that are led by us young people who are not even ready for our own liberation. We do things because we want to trend on social media, or we do things because we hope that one day we'll be rewarded and we will be the ones that are benefiting from the tender system that we see our brothers and our fathers in the communities driving very big cars because of sabotaging the poor in the communities that we come from, and we celebrate that. We do not call them thugs, we do not throw stones at them, we celebrate them when we praise them for stealing money from the poor. So young people are responsible, and I believe that as young people, we need to be ready first ourselves to be liberated, for our own liberation, before we can even start speaking about shutting down the country. University is just minimal, and those are just things that go according to momentum. Momentum dies every time, it's not permanent. I talk too much, I know, so let me just stop there.
Not even on protest being for momentum. I know I had my little case last year, and for me, I mean, it lost momentum, and protests lose momentum, and that's the way things work. Like that. Life goes, but the problem always remains, the fees must fall protest, as you know. So that being said, do you still think that protest should still happen? Because I know that when people protest, they protest because they're over it, they're tired, they're frustrated. Nobody make my life a mess and just turn things around for myself. We protest because we're tired, we're frustrated. We've tried to have conversations, we've tried to appeal to the people in charge, and it's not happening. But as you're saying, you shoot yourself in the foot because people die, people get hurt, people get arrested, and so forth. Do you then not recommend protest at all? Do you just think we must just not protest?
A protest is I believe that is a weapon of the unheard. Okay. And we really claim that we are unheard when we have our comrades whom we speak with on WhatsApp every day, or we sit together when they're in Pretoria from Cape Town, and we have beers. These are people that are in parliament. So do we still think that we're unheard when we have those people within our proximities? No, we're not unheard. So then we need to ask ourselves, what is the real motive behind the protest that we're having now? They're progressive, they're serving certain purpose, and to a certain extent, they building a certain momentum or culture of activism within young people. But are we doing it? Is it having any impact on us, positive impact, or is it just a way of victimizing ourselves as young people? We need to ask ourselves that first. But I think that also, with these protests that we're seeing today, in 2016, when I was suspended from the University of Pretoria, I was moved from res and I stayed in a private res somewhere in Arcadia. And I was with a friend of mine, Rasita, who now works in China. So we were having this conversation, and I said to him, you know what? You might be shocked. A lot of young people that are in these protests do not even know why they're there. They're just there because they saw media, they saw the protest on TV, and they just want to go there. They're going to support, but they don't know what they're supporting. And you know what? Some comrades said, no, that's not true. So we did a small test. We went to the kitchen where everyone cooks and that res, and we said, let's just go there and ask two students. We asked them two questions. One, if they participated in the Business Hall protest. If they did participate, two, why were they participating? And we found about three that participated, but they didn't know why they were participating. They couldn't even speak on what free education is in the definition of students. Even in one of the commissions that Professor Tulima tried to host when she was public protector, that was one of the biggest problems. She called young people there. She said, now tell us, what do you want? And there were a lot of different views that were expressed there, because some people are not even sure what's happening there. They don't know why they're protesting. They can't even articulate it, but yet we are there in numbers. Only the leaders, most of the time, and I don't want to generalize, but most of the time, it's only the leaders that have been trying to engage management, that have been seeing these wrong things and trying to fix them within their campuses. The leaders that are usually targeted and expelled or victimized in these universities, together with those that join and quickly catch up and they understand the momentum of what the protests are about. Those are the only people who can't breathe. A majority of them are just there because it's momentum. In 2015, when we went to the University of Pretoria, when we went to the union buildings, you would be shocked that we had some people that went there with picnic baskets. And I don't want to just try and assume things there, but if you go to a protest with picnic baskets and the way the protest turned, then you realize that really some people didn't understand what was happening there. They thought it was just a movement, a nice movement where we can just meet, and gather. We're going to protest. We're going to chant slogans, and the president is going to listen to us and give us education. Whereas things didn't turn out that way. So a lot of people really care who are participating in these protests are not like that. They still can breathe. Some of them are experiencing these problems, but they don't realize it. Some of them are experiencing the problems, but they don't know that they can actually fight for their own rights. And it's the issue of democracy, literacy, and education in South Africa. There's very little. That's why most young people do not vote, and we've seen stats in elections. Young people do not participate in local, provincial, and national elections. Yet they are the ones that fill the streets to protest. And you ask yourself if they understood it, if young people in general or majority understood it, then really would see it in the voting. But it doesn't reflect at all that young people can't breathe anymore.
Okay. In your daily life, your activism, when you're busy with your app and other stuff, hold on the things that you do. I think you said you tried to embrace it, or from what I've gathered from earlier, you start to feel like there is still a colonial hold.
I struggle to get the question. May you please just repeat it?
Okay. I was saying that in your daily life, like just today, as a teacher, as an activist, in your activism rather, and just with the work that you do on the side as well, do you not feel that there is a colonial hold over you? Do you not feel that the Western world has just infringed itself so much into your daily life that you've lost basically identity as an African child, or that it's a
So I'm just gonna try and answer the question the way I think I heard it. So I think it's one thing that I was trying to articulate earlier on, that if we're going to speak about decolonization, it's really, practically speaking, in this current state that we're living in today, the world that we're living in, it's really impossible for us to imagine ourselves being independent of anything. It's really difficult. For example, even the Zoom that we're using now, it's a software that was developed in America. It was not developed here. A lot of these programs that we're using now to communicate, for example, are not programs that are developed in Africa. They're programs that are developed elsewhere. And usually they're the ones that gain momentum and they're the ones that are able to sustain themselves. So if we are going to say we are becoming independent of everything else, then how are we going to do it? For example, I went to initiation school, and luckily that's where I got to learn a lot about my culture and where we come from as Africans. But when I was there, I was told that so whatever that they teach us, that you can't write it down. You only have to recite it. But in this day that we're living in today, we live in a world whereby we now have to communicate virtually, WhatsApp and all of those things. And how is initiation school going to take place in a situation of COVID-19? Because it had even to be postponed, because it's impossible for initiation to happen in a situation like this. Like, how do we, I just want to understand, maybe I've not engaged this further, but there is, I believe that there's no way that we can completely overhaul this system that we are captured by right now. Maybe not in my lifetime. We can try and push to a certain extent. So if we're going to, I know, I feel, I see it every time. I mean, we had an issue now about hair. I've had young teachers who are my friends who are telling me that learners who have hair like mine that's not combed are ill-disciplined. Young teachers who are saying that, young teachers who are saying that when a teacher is forcefully combing the other learners' hair, they're instilling discipline in them. And for me, I saw that as abuse. But if you have young people that still think like that, young people that still see black hair as a problem in this day and age, and what do you think we can do? This thing is much more deeper than we think. But I'm not saying we need to give up. What we're doing now, the work that we're doing now is great, and it's taking us to a certain extent. We need to have conversations about these things. But one thing that broke my heart more was when one teacher said she recited something that was written by another young person on my Facebook post about her to her class. And I'm like, but that's like indoctrinating them to think of it in a certain way, because you can't recite your beliefs to learners. You must engage them and allow them to have their own independent views. But if we have young teachers that still go out to recite and indoctrinate young people with thoughts that are anti them and are anti their identity, then what do we think? Because at some point I once thought, you know what, if this older generation of leaders and community builders passes away, because the fact is that we're all going to pass away and they're also going to pass away. I thought if we become the parents and the grandparents, things are going to be better, because the message that we'll be preaching to our learners will be much different. But I don't see that when I go out of the community. I don't see that when I go out of the township. Our privilege sometimes tells us that things are going to be better, but go to the township. You will see young parents gathering and dancing with savannas on their head, with toddlers sitting next to them. Some of them smoking happily with these toddlers, some of them giving these toddlers alcohol to drink so that they can be tipsy and fall asleep, while else the parents continue to party. And you ask yourself, are we really that near to the freedom and the liberation that we're looking for as Africa? So it's very difficult if you try to go and engage or take what we speak about every day in our little corners as comrades, and you try to see if it's practical like that in the community. So it's a very difficult thing to speak about. I mean, even decolonization and globalization cannot be spoken of in the same sentence, because globalization is basically the enforcement, maybe, or the adaptation of global standards and norms and cultures into different communities. That is why today you see a lot of our young people. You know what? Today when I was at home, because I had to drive from home today, there's this young boy who's an artist. So when we were growing up, he was singing hip hop, and he had a tattoo of tears, 3 drops of tears on his eye. And I'm thinking to myself today, the music career didn't work, but with that tattoo on his eye, how is he going to find employment? Okay. According to the norms and standards of employment today in the country. But I got to understand, I don't follow that much Western music, but I got to understand that I think I saw an American artist, Lil Wayne, having the same tattoo. And that guy looked up to Lil Wayne at that time. But you look at now the cultures that are influencing our lives today, and you think, can we really say we can be independent in our lifetime, at least, of colonization in its entirety? And I think it's impossible. But we can go to a certain extent, and we can try and find ways of doing things in our own modernity. We can find our own unity, because one thing that is the biggest weapon for us as Africans, and I believe, is the unity of the African children, the youth, not even the old people. The unity of African youth is our biggest weapon to fight whatever that we think is a problem in our continent. But even the unity is a challenge, because young people are doing different things. Young people are doing very dramatic things. Young boys are killing women in our communities every day. Young boys are raping women in our communities every day. And you think to yourself, these are the same young people that we think, or we have hope that one day they will come up and take leadership roles in households. How is that possible? I mean,
I
we
hear
don't have
you.
the we don't have the uh, we don't have the viruses and to start our own little pandemics to disrupt the world economy so that we can benefit from whatever. We don't have nuclear weapons. We don't have bioweapons. So what do we do as Africans? We need to unite. But can we really unite if the world is continuing the way it's doing? We can, I believe so, but not in our lifetime. It depends on how much we continue speaking, and that's why I think one of the reasons I appreciate this platform is because it's giving us an opportunity to engage as young people, and maybe there are other young people who are also watching and listening who can now form their own opinions based on what we say, and go preach their
Yeah.
opinions to somewhere else. But we hardly have this. When I left university, I missed sessions where we'd sit with comrades and we have conversations. Sometimes you disagree on a conversation and you realize when you're alone that no man, the comrades were speaking some truth there, just that I wasn't aware. And you move from there, you build from there. Comrades were working now, we all stressed about employment and trying to make ends meet. There's no opportunity for us to meet.
Yeah.
Every time we have to meet with those comrades, we have to set appointments and reserve dates months ahead and set budgets for us to be able to book, of us to be able to accommodate our needs today, traveling and all of that. So it's bad, but it's not all hope lost.
I hear you. I wanted to ask, whose responsibility do you think it is for there to be a change in the education system? Because the government, or the states rather, has already proved to us that they don't care to adhere to our need or our cries for decolonized education. And I mean, you said yourself that that isn't your main priority, that isn't your focus, to decolonize education right now. So whose responsibility is it to have a change in the education sector?
You know what? I think it is the responsibility of mainly young people who are still in the education system.
Okay.
As we see, maybe similar to higher education, but it is also the responsibility of the community at large. But with the community, it's a very tricky thing. Like I said, as a teacher, if I'm going to even start anything in basic education, I must do it knowing that I might be expelled or suspended from work, or even lose my job. But for young people who are still learners at the school, some of them don't even know that they're empowered actually to form part of the governance of their own schools. But some of them don't even know that some of these things that we're speaking about today, decolonization, it's not something that just
Okay.
can happen at the basic education ministry. It's something that has to take an election for it to take effect. So these young people need to understand that the power that they have in terms of elections, because that's when you elect your policy. You can never elect a certain political party knowing very well what their policies are, and then you want to go to the streets
Okay.
and strike against the
Okay.
very same party
Okay.
voted for the same policies that they were manifesting, or the very same history that they have. You need to understand that some of these things we're not going to win them simply because we are talking about them or we're on the street protesting about them. We don't have the numbers now. We don't have the organization and the discipline that those that came before us had. Solomon, they sacrificed a lot, but at least they had some discipline and some unity. So young people need to understand the powers and the privileges that they have in terms of democracy. And everything is just a matter of 5 years in democracy. You are able to have time to try, test, and change if it fails. But young
Okay.
people understand it. But it's an issue of the community at large. I mean, parents in basic education, a lot of them are not even that involved in the education of children. Schools,
Sure.
besides the issue of decolonization, but schools are governed by SGP, school governing bodies, for which a huge part of that is parents. And
Okay.
parents just paid there. A lot of them are afraid because they think their children are going to be victimized, but some of them do not even want to take responsibility because they're too busy trying to make ends meet at home, trying to work so that at the end of the month they can be able to afford school fees and food. And with such a community, then it's going to be very difficult for us to achieve that. But we are all responsible. Even the same people, even the same people that we trust to lead us in these things, the same people that we trust with the government, do not have hope in their own systems. That is why you see the children of these ministers and the directors and the MECs do not go to schools in the townships. Even if it's a school in the township, they'll go to the best schools in the townships. They will not just take them anywhere, or they go to private schools, because a lot of former model schools have the same systems as private schools. I mean, I've been being exposed as a unionist to different schools. I find most model schools to actually be like private schools, even if they are public schools and managed by government. Still, the same privileges exist, the same access to resources exist.
Yeah.
You know? So it's up to us. Everything's up to us. We have to decide what we want. And when we're ready for it, we have to go all of us united and get it.
What is the goal though? What goal are we trying to reach with trying to? I'm sorry, my connection seems to have been a little off there.
Yeah, I didn't get the question.
Sorry, I didn't even hear that you were still speaking. I apologize. I wanted to say, what is the goal? What is the goal that we're trying to reach with the idea of removing a Western hold of our education system? Taking us back to our African roots. What is the goal? What are we trying to achieve by doing that?
You see, by doing that, then that's when we'll be achieving independence. That's when we'll be achieving.
Okay.
That's when we'll be taking control of our own thinking. Number one, we'll be taking control of our own lives. We live them the way we want to live them, not the way other people are living them. That's when we'll be taking control of our own economy. You know, we'll be taking control of our own natural resources that we work in this land every day. And by taking control of those things, you basically now take power of the African life, and you take charge of your own life, and you're able to dictate the terms of reference for our own lives and our own livelihoods in our communities. And that is where the problem is. Those are the challenges. That is where a lot of red tape is, because it seems like people are aware that once we take charge of that, once we are able to successfully decolonize ourselves and our communities, the power that will possess them and the danger that unity and that power that will be possessing at that time will pose to many countries, especially Western countries, who depend largely on Africa for their own survival. You will find that a lot of more than 40% of those countries' economy is dependent on Africa. And if you take charge of all of that, it means that you are removing them from first world countries to third world countries, and you're giving Africa the status of first world country. And that is a very different thing that will not be allowed easily. For us to be able to achieve it, we need to be psychologically more than anything else. We need to be mentally ready more than anything else. The rest can, as long as our minds are ready, anything else is possible.
But then you would think that with something this simple, as you're saying, it's for our independence, and it is literally to strengthen us as Africans and to strengthen our place in this world, and also to strengthen livelihoods. Why do you think it's such a problem for other Africans to that we want to do this, that we want to return to our roots, that we want to make ourselves independent? Why do you think notion that so many Africans reject Africans to make this our country?
I struggled to hear you a bit there, but I think I understood the question, and I'm going to try and answer it. according to my understanding. So I think yeah, a lot of, I don't know if you're still talking. Can I, oh, sure. I think what is difficult about other Africans to understand that we're doing this for our own good and our own betterment is that, there's this thing of trying to make sure that we keep Black people impoverished, so that every day when we wake up as Black people, the first thing we think of is what are we going to eat today? And without food, without having anything to eat, without having any water to drink, then it's impossible that we can even be able to start thinking about our roots, whereas there's no food in the house to eat. So there's this thing that I think is deliberately happening, whereby Black people are being kept, African people are being kept, or are being pushed to poverty, even though we try to uplift our lives. Something just happens that tries to push us back to poverty, so that we can keep on fighting the struggle of trying to better our lives and trying to uplift our communities economically, whereas we forget the other important things that are happening on the side. You know, we were speaking about black tax now. A lot of us, when we leave university, we stop even activism because we're trying to focus on building houses for our parents, trying to make sure that at least now there's food in the house to eat, trying to make sure that your siblings live better lives. But then by doing that, because it's too much to handle, we forget about the struggles that we're so passionate about. And this thing is deliberate. You'll see in countries like Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe was deliberately put into poverty through sanctions. And it's those sanctions that made sure that the people of Zimbabwe even today, in everything that they do, they still struggle to make ends meet every day. The people of Africa, that's why we have an influx of our African brothers in Africa. And some people think they are here to take their jobs, so that's nonsense. These people are coming here because they are trying to find survival. They've left their communities, they've left their children, their families, their parents. They have sacrificed and traveled hours for them to try and find bread. These people that we are accusing of taking our jobs today, when they come into South Africa, usually they do a lot of important jobs for nothing. Find that someone is working as a security guard and is only being paid 1,000 because we know that they've got no other option but to take this. They don't have anyone to fall back to or even a house to go back to. And with this, our people are kept into poverty and they forget about anything else. All they try to think about every day is having something to eat in the stomach. That's why even during elections, and it's a norm across Africa, I'm yet to see it happening in other Western countries, like it's happening in South Africa, whereby people just take a box of T-shirts and they go around giving to the poor in communities for them to vote for a certain party. Others take food parcels just to go and give them just for that time, for people to eat. And that's what we need to do as Africans according to this system that is established right now. We need to always just focus on getting something to eat and forget about our struggles, forget about our unity, forget about our roots, and forget about our liberation. Because how can you even go and try to fight about liberation on an empty stomach? It's impossible. And this thing is being kept deliberately, it's being sponsored, and it's being engineered. A lot of money is being spent on making sure that our people remain poor, so that that's all they ever do, and that's what they all focus on, rather than fighting for their own liberation and survival. So these topics that we're having now, okay, these ways that we're speaking about now, and as I repeat, these are very foreign ways to a lot of our people. Decolonization, our roots, those are foreign concepts to a lot of our people because all they know is compiling a CV, looking for employment, trying to get grants, social grants. How do you apply for a social grant? Even if you can ask a lot of our people, and I'm also one of those, one of the victims. People know the grant that they know is the social is the government grant, the social grants that they get for their children and for the elderly. But people don't know that there are things that are called business grants. You go to the rural areas now, you ask them, which grant do you know? They will tell you about government grants that they use to give children and the elderly in the communities. You ask them about a business grant, they don't know about that. Because why should we focus on such important things that are going to empower us and are going to make us a threat to the establishment at the end of the day?
I hear you. I can be done to decolonize and remove the Western hold on Africa and South Africa particularly. Can be done.
Hi, Kia.
Hi.
I lost you there. I couldn't get
it. So I think I was saying my question in closing, my last question. What do you think can still be done or can be done to remove the colonial hold over Africa and over South Africa in particular, outside of the education industry or sector? Because I feel like education is a start and it's breeding new people, but what can still be done to help or to aid other Africans outside of the education sector?
I think there are two fundamental and important things. Yeah. The first one, we need to unite Africans.
Okay.
Across countries, we need to stop seeing fellow Africans as foreigners, but we need to start seeing them as brothers and as sisters. We need to stop seeing fellow Africans as a threat, but we need to start seeing them as an opportunity for us to unite and engage in each other. Because when someone from Ghana lives in my community, for me, first thing that I do is to try and engage them so that I can understand their culture and the community that they grow in and the challenges that they face. So we need to start loving each other as Africans. We need to start there. We need to start a big campaign and an education drive to teach people about Africanness and to teach people about their own identity, because it's a very simple thing here. Teaching a South African about Africanness is teaching them about themselves. Teaching a Ghanaian about Africanness is teaching them about themselves, their own identity. And number two, we need to educate our people. We need to educate our people and inform them. Not necessarily educate in terms of the classroom and textbooks and the subject that we're speaking of, but we need to information so that they stay informed and they know what's happening in the world. They know what's happening in their own communities. We need to have these through these conversations that we're having right now. We're starting something, someone that can start questioning, what does this boy mean? How is this happening? And through those things, so we need two things. We need to unify ourselves, and we need to educate ourselves. And through those two things, then we can have the Africa that we all dream of and the Africa that we are all afraid of.
I hear you. I think that was it for me. Thank you so much for your insight today. I don't know if you have anything that you want to add, your final perhaps.
We've spoken a lot on a lot of important things. And for me, what I can say is that thank you very much for the opportunity that you've given. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very inspired, and we go through a lot of things as young people in our own little spaces, and we forget. We go through things that make us forget why we started doing what we're doing today, and because of the little privileges that we have, we even forget where we come from, where we were a few years ago. And I'm very grateful for this opportunity to talk to you, because it always reminds me of where I come from and where I'm going and why I started doing what I'm doing. But it's also an opportunity for me to engage with fellow young Africans and see that there are Africans who
Yeah.
are still passionate about African liberation as all of us. But I think, lastly, Kia, I just want to say that what also encourages me is that in our conversation today, we spoke very minimal of what is usually the trend when young people speak, those who think that they are conscious. And we try to speak of something that we call white monopoly capital. It exists. But we spoke minimal of apartheid today, actually, because a lot of our leaders do this deliberately. They are responsible for our poverty and our struggle for the past 27 years. But every time they speak to young people, they will come there and still speak about apartheid 27 years later. Whereas apartheid never went anywhere and stole 200 million that was meant to improve the roofing of poor black people in a community in some province. Whereas apartheid never went anywhere and elected a black government that was going to be responsible for shooting and killing an innocent civilian in Joburg, for arresting students that are fighting for for free education. There was not apartheid that did that. So I'm very glad that when we speak as young people, we're able to speak now without getting to this thing of blaming apartheid even on things that are obvious. Because that is why a lot of us are still backwards, and that is why we still have young people that today go to the street to protest and tomorrow go again to the street to campaign for you to vote for the same people that you're protesting against yesterday. So I'm very glad we are moving somewhere. We are accepting reality and we are seeing what is practical. And through it, I think we can be able to start speaking about more serious things than obsessing about or lying about things that we know are not even the cause. They are important to reflect on. Apartheid, I always refer to. I don't finish a conversation without referring to it because it's very important to reflect to understand where we come from. But if we're going to speak about today and moving forward, we need to understand that our oppression today has nothing to do with apartheid. And I'm very glad. And thank you very much for this opportunity. And thank you to the Rise Black Child movement. I think I'm at home now. I've found a new family in the Rise Black Child movement.
Definitely. I think we definitely adopted you. Thank you so much for honoring your invite, and thank you for sharing your insight. I think you've definitely shed a light in me today, and I think you've shed a light in many people's lives today. So thank you for your insight. Thank you for honoring your invite. And I can't wait to hopefully have you again another day and dive into other conversations.
Sure, I could also can't wait to come back. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was it from us tonight, guys. Please enjoy this video. Please share it with everybody you know, and just learn some more about the world that you live in. Make sure that you do not ever forget to help another Black child rise. I was your host tonight, Kea Monama, and my guest tonight was the amazing Kabelo Mahlobogwane, and we are signing out today. Thank you. Bye.